We all know the power of social medias, which can go beyond connecting people. It can definitely help us support the conservation work of wildlife.
Next, we have our last speaker who who always been an avid supporter for animal welfare and rights in his whole life. Benjamin Uy from SMK Damansara Jaya will tell you why status quo is not enough.
Test, test. Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me? All right. So, hi everyone. My name is Benjamin Uy. I'm from SMK Damansara Jaya. And today I'll be talking about tiger conservation and why status quo isn't enough. Or more specifically, why humans aren't doing conservation right now very well and how can we change. So let's get right to the chase. When you ask the average individual what the purpose of conservation is, more often than not, people will tell you it's for our future generation. It's so that our kids in the future will be able to coexist with these beautiful and majestic animals. I remember hearing an advertisement on Light FM last year in which a little girl asked her mom, "What are tigers?" Because in the distant future, tigers are already extinct. And the mom couldn't bear to tell the child that because of humans' greed, because of human ignorance, the tigers are extinct. Now, as much as I agree with this sentiment, as much as I agree that yes, our future generations should be able to coexist with these beautiful creatures, should coexist with tigers, the more I think about it, the more I realize that there's an inherent flaw with this sort of mindset. But before I delve deeper into that, allow me to share with you my first memory of tigers. So, my first memory of tigers came about when I was 5 or 6 years old, when I was in Genting Highlands, where my dad over there took me and my family to what essentially was a circus show. I didn't remember much of the show, but I remembered the main event, the main attraction, the Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, which was two tigers and one white lion. So as a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Not only could I see these big cats in person, but I could see them performing tricks. It's so cool as a child. So naturally, after that, my interest on big cats peaked. I started going home and watching documentaries on Animal Planet and Nat Geo Wow, back when there's still Channel 56 and Channel 50 on Astro. I feel quite old now that, yes, Astro had double-digit channels and I was alive to see that. So it influenced my life when I watch more documentaries and I read more articles about tiger conservation. And that is when I started realizing stuff. That is when I started growing up and realizing that humans were the sole cause of the suffering of 90% of the worldwide tiger population over the past century. It's because of things like this that make me feel repulsed and disgusted, that humans are willing to do this to tigers for our selfish purposes. Which begs us to the question, how did we get here? How did we allow this to happen? So as the previous speakers told you, there are multiple plethora of reasons why we hunt tigers, one of which is because of traditional Chinese medicine. Considering that there are a lot of alternatives like modern medicine, why do people still resort to this? I believe it's because of these people's superstition, and naturally because these tiger products seem exotic. Like the same way we would eat ice cream, nasi lemak flavored ice cream because it's weird and exotic. These people resort to these form of traditional medicines which are exotic because they might think it helped them or because of superstitions such as that. We already gave you an example of the bones being used to ward off evil spirits so that you won't get diseases in the future. Or some people may even think it can cure cancer. It's because of unproven theories like these and superstitions that people still continue to buy these products. But even more repulsive and even more disgusting is when people hunt these tigers for trophy hunting. What do I mean by this? I mean they hunt these tigers, stuff them with cotton and stick them on the wall just so they can empower themselves, so they can feel better about themselves, they feel more powerful. So for people who buy it for medicine, I sort of get them, right? They may be desperate and they're searching for other alternatives for medicine. But I think there's a special place down there for people who just hunt tigers and just stuff them on the wall. We can't let this happen anymore. Considering that there are already current conservation efforts, let's analyze them and tell you, I'm about to explain to you why it's not enough. So before I move on, all these poaching or for trophy hunting or traditional Chinese medicine has caused the worldwide population of tigers to decrease by 90% over the past century. Think about that. So moving on, what are the current conservation efforts and why are they not enough? So the biggest way like governments or people in power tend to reduce poaching or to reduce like the killing of tigers is to implement more laws and policies. These laws and policies might include banning the trade of tigers as a whole, monitoring wild tigers, or having setting up patrols around selected forests. Why do I think this isn't enough? Number one is because more often than not, these policies and these laws are a reactive policy instead of a proactive policy. What do I mean by this? So I, as a poacher, will only get hunted down by the authorities insofar as I kill that tiger. I'll only be taken to jail if I kill that tiger and that tiger is already dead. But the problem is, if I already killed the tiger, the damage has already been done. I think the problem is even more magnified when in status quo, in like the day and age we live in, there is more incentive for poachers to kill these tigers. Why do I say so? It's because of the basic economical principle of the supply and demand principle. So we all know for a fact that the number of tigers have decreased over the past century, right? Decreased rapidly. But at the same time, the demand for tiger products is still at a constant rate. It might have reduced a bit, but not as much as the supply of tigers has reduced. So what this means is, these poachers can sell tiger parts for a much higher price than they would have 20 to 30 years ago. Right now, there's even more of an incentive for these people to hunt tigers because they can sell them for a much higher price than they did 50 years ago. Let me give you an example, right? If I can sell a tiger part for 1 million ringgit and I go to jail for 5 years per se, 5 to 10 years per se, and I only get fined 100,000 ringgit, which isn't even the correct amount. You probably get fined a lot less than that. I'm still making a net profit of 900,000 ringgit, even if 5 years of my life is spent in jail. 900,000 ringgit. That's more than what 80% of Malaysians would make in their lifetime. So I don't think the incentive for poachers is reduced per se, but there is more of an incentive for poachers to hunt these tigers because the rewards they get significantly outweigh the risks that they face. So there's also a large argument that zoos are an effective form of conservation for tigers because obviously they've been physically protected from the poachers around them. They've been kept in a highly secure area in which the poachers can't break in, or the poachers won't go to the trouble of breaking into these zoos and killing them, right? But why do I personally agree with zoos as a form of conservation? Number one, there are a high number of cases of abuse cases within zoos where the zoos mistreat their animals because they want to prioritize profits. They give them low quality food because they want to cut costs on these animals, right? But even if abuse doesn't happen, even if these zoos treat their animals like kings and princes, why do I think it's still bad? Because the quality of life isn't maintained. No matter how well you treat the tiger, it's still going to be kept in a glass box within that zoo, in which they can never live a fulfilling life which they're supposed to live, like out in the wild, where they can hunt freely, where they can roam around freely. This can never happen in zoos. So even if you treat them well, I still disagree, because conservation should not just be about keeping the number of tigers at an all-time high. We should also talk about keeping the quality of lives of tigers. So what if there are 1 million tigers in the world, but they're all kept in zoos in which they cannot live a fulfilling life? So enough about me complaining. What do I properly envision conservation is? Let's tackle the latter part of the problem of captive tigers in zoos. So I believe that all tigers in zoos or in captivity should be relocated to tiger reserves or tiger sanctuaries. A great example of this is the Hukong Valley Tiger Reserve in Myanmar, in which it's 6,500 kilometers square, right? That's almost a perfect replica of a lifestyle of a tiger in which they can roam around freely. They can hunt freely and live life to the fullest. But at the same time, in these sanctuaries, these tigers are being protected from the poachers because it's still a highly secure area in which there are securities protecting these tigers. So we get the best of both worlds. These tigers get to live a fulfilling life, a high quality of life, but at the same time, they're being protected by the poachers in the wild. So in Malaysia, we're slowly moving towards this, right? Where we see governments making efforts of when they're currently building a tiger sanctuary in Pahang, near the Deerland Park. However, I don't think we should just stop there, especially since when Malaysia is should be a big advocate for tigers' rights. Since we have one of the most beautiful subspecies of tigers, the Malayan tiger, we should have more of these sanctuaries instead of one small one in Pahang. So what do I think is the main change that needs to happen within status quo? How are we gonna actually help tigers not only in captivity, but also in the wild? The thing is, ladies and gentlemen, we have to talk about it. We, the people, have the power to change. We have to create a grassroots movement in which the people force governments, force people in power to change. So the thing is simple. We just have to talk about it more. Instead of going home on Twitter and ranting about AdMats, let's rant about these tigers' life, the suffering of these tigers every day while we live a comfortable life at home. Let's rant about how poachers get away with killing tigers when they make millions and millions of dollars on profit, and they get away with it, right? So what happens when you talk about it even more is when politicians are going to do something about it. There's more incentive for politicians to do something about it. Let me draw a comparison and a parallel to the controversial gun control laws in America. So especially since the recent Parkland, Florida shootings, more and more people are vocalizing their opinions on gun control rights, and especially Susan's, where you see rallies happening on how they feel like the government should protect the lives of the children. These are the sort of things that forces change to happen. So now what happens is, in America, politicians' views on gun control becomes a determining factor on whether people vote for them or not. This is especially important in a democratic country when we, the people, have the power to change. So if in Malaysia, if we vocalize our opinions on tigers' rights, if we tell the government this is something we want, then it's more likely for governments to do something about it. It's more likely for politicians to campaign for tigers' rights because they want to gain your votes. Although it hasn't really happened in Malaysia, there isn't much of a political movement in Malaysia. I think there's a glimpse of this happening. Like recently, I've seen Malaysia more unified than it ever was before because of 3 words: crispy chicken rendang. So if you didn't know, there was a British MasterChef judge who criticized our very own Malaysian for cooking rendang which isn't crispy. So naturally, we were all unified against this, because how dare a British person who's so culturally insensitive make fun of our food like that? Through 17 years of my life, I've never seen Malaysians so unified as to tell him why he's so insensitive, why he's so ignorant, and things like that. Why can't this be the same for our tigers? Why can't we be as vocal about our tigers as we are about our food? After all, as many of our speakers explained to you, these tigers are our identity. Harimau Malaya is our team, and the Malayan tiger is our identity, is our national animal. So why can't we do that for these tigers? Let's talk about it even more so that change can actually happen and people in power want to do something about it. So this sort of thing sets off a chain reaction and watch more beneficial things happen. So when we talk about it even more, I believe that there'll be more corporate sponsorships for NGOs. We see an example of this when Maybank has donated 5 million ringgit over the course of 4 years to WWF-Malaysia Tiger Project. It's things like these that will help these NGOs even more carry out more projects so they can help the tigers better in the future. I believe it'll happen more if more and more people talk about it, because let's get this thing straight, right? Although, no matter how good corporate people are, they have to maximize profits. But if we talk about this even more, if we talk about tigers' rights even more, they'll realize that being active in tiger conservation and being active in animal rights improves their PR and improves their image, especially with companies that directly involve like customers like Maybank, where they're in the service industry, where their PR and their image directly affects their sales. This is when they're more incentivized to donate more to NGOs. This is when they're more incentivized to create more projects to help tigers in the future. So I believe we can force that change to happen when people realize this is what we want. They will cater to our wants, and eventually we'll create a better life not only for us, but for tigers as well. So another thing that we all should do, and we've explained this multiple times throughout the day, is called the Wildlife Crime Hotline. You can take a picture of the slide if you want, or memorize the number, because if you see any case of abuse happening, this is the number you should call. It'll greatly help the animals on the ground who are suffering from poachers. So if my fantasy world comes true, where we all talk about it and change slowly happens, what does this mean for the fight for conservation? There'll be ultimately more support for NGOs. As much as these NGOs are doing God's work, they cannot effectively run without support from us and without support from people with money and people with power. So when we talk about it even more, when more corporations donate money to these NGOs, where they can fund more projects, this is when I was talking about tiger sanctuaries can happen even more. Or when we talk about it even more, there'll be more collaboration with our government because they realize this is what we want. So Perhilatan will work more and more with WWF. Perhilatan will work more and more with MyCat because this is what the people want and this is what is beneficial for society in our eyes. So with all this happens, we can finally create a world where tigers no longer have to live in fear, where tigers no longer have to be kept in zoos and be seen as an effective form of conservation. So in conclusion, if all this happens, there'll be an increase in the population of tigers by the end of 2022, which is the WWF's T×2 initiative, where they aim to double the amount of tigers by the year of 2022. So there is some form of optimism where the worldwide tiger population increased for the very first time in 2016. But let's not take this as a sign to relax. Let's take this as a sign of optimism to work harder for it. Because for the longest time, people thought that the fight for conservation for tigers is useless because there's so many efforts going into it, but very little results reflect that. But 2016 proved otherwise. So let's work more on it because we know it's possible. We know we can increase the number of tigers in the future. So let's talk about it even more. Let's fight for more change to happen so that tigers can roam around the world again. So in conclusion to all of this, remember earlier in my speech why I disagree with the sentiment that tiger conservation is for our future generation. Because it isn't. The sooner we realize it, the better. Tiger conservation is for them. They deserve to live in this world as much as you and I do. And it's selfish for us to think otherwise. So I hope you go home today and you realize that you, the people, have the power to change. I'm not asking for much. Just talk about it even more. Talk about it with friends. Rant about it on Twitter. Post more stuff on Facebook. So we can fight for change to happen. Because if the people in power realize this is what we want, then this is the change that we're gonna get. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Benjamin, for bringing such an important issue to our attention. I believe it is something we don't often discuss every day.